Our story starts in 1997. It's the day of my parents' wedding and I'm ready hours before my dad. My uncle comes over and says he has something for me. He takes off his rucksack and pulls out a plastic grey box. He tells me it's called a SNES. We fire it up and my life is changed forever. So, 1997. I loved playing with toy cars when I was a child, and having that translate to the screen with Super Street Racer was beyond anything I could imagine. The game felt intense, it felt fast-paced, and even if I came dead last, I still loved it. The SNES was very much my uncle's, but I still got to play it nearly every weekend. When I got home, however, all I could think about was playing again, thinking of how to beat my uncle at both Super Street Racer and F-Zero. Gaming was now ingrained into me. I was hooked. In 1998, my dad brought home a NES, the predecessor to the SNES. The graphical and controller downgrade didn't matter. It was all about being able to play more games against my family and friends. At home, I had Duck Hunt with the NES light gun. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, but it was my introduction to the PlayStation that gave me what I had been craving. FIFA 98 was significant in that it got me out of the house. My parents were pushing for me to go out and play with friends, and it just so happened one of those friends had a PlayStation. We spent hours on FIFA 98, both cooperatively and competitively. He almost always beat me, but again this didn't stop me from wanting to play more. I got my own PS1 in 1999, and the first game I got for it was Gran Turismo. My dad went into the shop to get it while I waited in the car, and as soon as we got home we started playing immediately. As the year went on, I would keep practicing against the computer and against my sister. She enjoyed Bomberman more than Ridge Racer and Gran Turismo, so I played that with her and the racers with my dad. Towards the end of the year, I got a new kind of game. Street Fighter EX plus Alpha, my first fighter. My dad figured out how to Hadouken and wouldn't tell me how. It was frustrating, but the button bashing still got past him. I was starting to beat him more and more often, but then I got into a fight at school and my relationship with beat-em-ups was cut off.
The crowds are very thick. The mood is very anticipatory. This should be quite something to see.
Fast forward to 2001 and shooters were the flavour of the year for me. Again, my uncle was the one to introduce me to new genres. He had Quake and Unreal Tournament on his PC, and whilst these were games I definitely shouldn't have been playing at the tender age of 9, I couldn't get enough of the fast-paced, immediate reward systems. Neither of these games would stick with me though, as the whole thing was a little bit one-dimensional. The literal game changer came with the N64, and those of you who know your games will know exactly where I'm going with this. The upgrade from 2 players to 4 was incredible, and while it was difficult to play on such a tiny section of the screen, the game was still immense fun. GoldenEye was the first game I had played with a huge range of weapons that weren't just segregated into 2 or 3 categories. The game is pretty janky now, but back then it was the best thing in the world. I would defy you to find a list of top 10 shooters of all time without GoldenEye on it somewhere. Skipping ahead to 2004, 2 extremely important things happened. Number 1 was my casual move into another sports game, namely Tiger Woods' PGA Tour. I first played this game on the original Xbox with one of my cousins, and whilst he also introduced me to Need for Speed Underground, Tiger Woods was the one that gripped me. There was a perfect balance between luck, skill, and character building that I just couldn't get enough of. The 2004 installment is still one of my all-time favourite games, because it is the best sports game in existence. Yes it is, fight me. The second event was the release of Halo 2. You may be wondering, what about Halo 1? Well Jimmy, I didn't play Halo 1 in its competitive format until much later in my life. I dabbled a little when it was new, but never got into it until I was in college. Halo 2, on the other hand, pulled me in and held me there. every weekend myself and 15 or more others would meet in a darkened room in the middle of town, link up our Xboxes and play Halo for 6 to 8 hours at a time. Moving from 2 to 4 players in GoldenEye was significant. Moving from 4 to 16 in Halo 2 was revolutionary. Having only your team sharing one screen meant there was no real way for others to cheat by screen watching. It had all the benefits of online play without the toxicity, most of the time. You were all in the room together and it was always great fun. This was probably the time in my life that would shape the way I played FPS games for a long time, and I wouldn't trade those memories for anything. 2006 came around and I finally got myself an Xbox 360. For a long time the only game I could play online was Need for Speed Carbon, and since the wireless adapter belonged to my stepbrother I could only use it when he was out. Eventually I got my own adapter. I could never afford to pay for Xbox Live, so I had to rely solely on those 48-hour free trials that came with games. Whenever I got one, I would spend as many of those 48 hours as I could playing Gears of War with a few friends from school. Eventually I met people online that I would come to know as well as my real friends. There was this one guy I met in a ranked match, and he sent me a message flaming me for beating him over and over. After about 3 months he saw me playing again, and asked if I would help him finish the campaign on Insanity, as I had the achievement and he didn't. We spent the next few weeks going through, bit by bit, and when we were done, I never heard from him again. The next year brought 2 more very significant games in my competitive career. Unfortunately, one of them was completely overshadowed by the other. Halo 3's release saw a return to what I had loved about Halo 2, with a bunch of new content to explore. The addition of cosmetics for character customization was something that Halo had needed, and since everything was unlockable through gameplay, it made you feel proud to wear whatever armor you had. While the core gameplay hadn't changed much, the experience was vastly improved. Everything felt tighter, and the addition of the Forge mechanic as well as being able to record your games had huge appeal. No longer was a story in the playground about how you 360 no-scoped 4 guys with one shot unprovable. You could record a clip, roughly edit it, and send it to your friends to prove your claims. It was incredible, and while it's obsolete today, it would still be incredibly useful for those who can't afford a capture card. Unfortunately, in Halo 3's shadow, a truly unique and amazing game fell by the wayside. Shadowrun was an FPS set in the universe of the tabletop game with the same name. There were 4 races you could play with different abilities and a huge catalogue of weapons, gadgets and magic that you could buy throughout the game. Imagine CSGO had a baby with Overwatch, and that's basically Shadowrun. The way I see it, there were 2 major factors that killed the game. Number 1 was the timing of its release. It came out in the same year as Halo 3, so the children who could only afford one game would go for Halo 3, as it has a huge name behind it. The other factor was that it was just way ahead of its time. Look at the success of Overwatch and you'll see what I mean. Shadowrun plays in much the same way, except everything was balanced because everyone had access to the same equipment. This made it a very skill-based game, rather than a rock-paper-scissors type experience. The 2 main game modes were Capture the Flag and Attrition, and there were enough maps to keep the game going until the matchmaking servers were nothing more than a ghost town. It was also one of the first games to successfully implement cross-platform play, meaning I could be on my PC playing with my friends on their Xboxes. How many games do you see with that today? The answer is less than 10. It is a damn shame that this game died, because if it came out just a year later, I think it would still be played today. In 2008, Gears of War was revived with the 2nd installment in the series. It was a great opportunity to rekindle some old online friendships, and I probably sank around 300 hours into it. At this stage I actually had 1 year of Xbox Live and could play all of my games to my heart's content. Gears 2 brought back a lot of muscle memory from the first game, and it was the first game I was able to take seriously and get pretty good at. I was at the end of my life at school, and so I had a huge break in between school and college to practice almost every day. My parents may not have liked me being indoors all the time, but in my eyes, a vitamin D deficiency was a small price to pay. This year also brought back another old friend: fighting games. Soul Calibur 4 was a game that I did put a lot of time into, but I still couldn't get the hang of it. I practiced for hours trying to memorise combos and counters to beat my friends, and while I would get a round or two every now and then, I could never beat them. I never lost focus though, and still wanted to beat them until a 5-minute window that killed my relationship with the genre almost indefinitely. I was staying at my friend's house. There were a couple of other people there and we were playing in a mini tournament amongst ourselves. I had lost every fight, but I was still having fun. As I lost the last one, I was offered an ultimatum. My friend says to me, "If you can beat my mum, you're still in the tourney." What happened next damaged my view on beat-em-ups forever. Even after my hours of practice, nailing combos, counters and juggles against the computer, putting my blood, sweat and tears into the game, I was beaten by a button-bashing mother of one. This left me with the impression that button bashing was a legitimate tactic that could beat good players, and when I played again, I button bashed and I won. The practice was all for naught. The time was wasted. My fondness for fighting games was dead. 2009, the beginning of the college years. This is where I truly sprouted as a gamer. I was doing a games development course, but really it was just a 2-year LAN party. Remember earlier when I said I skipped over Halo 1? Well, this is where I started to play it almost every day, and I was damn good at it. There was one other player in the class who was on my level, and so a free-for-all Slayer match ended up being me versus him versus the rest of the class. It was a great feeling knowing I was better than that many people, but what was even better was having someone at my level to continue to push me to be better. Halo wasn't the only game we played though. Another class favourite was Dawn of War Dark Crusade, a game that I had previously only played solo. Playing against real players was a lot harder than the CPU, however. To play with as many people as possible, we would usually play 2v2v2v2, meaning you always had someone else you could rely on. Dark Crusade was another significant game in my journey, as it introduced me to my love of real-time strategy. I loved the base and army building and the feeling of decimating an enemy. The only drawback is my skill level in RTS games is extremely average. So while I do enjoy the game, victory over an experienced player is a rarity. This can be a little off-putting depending on my mood, which back then was either angsty or angry. Sticking with the RTS genre, Warcraft 3 was another game the class would play both competitively and cooperatively. One guy brought the Frozen Throne expansion in on a memory stick and shared it around. It had a bunch of custom games on it, but the most played one was Hero Line Wars. I don't remember it all that well, but I think it was basically a MOBA with one lane. The final game from the first year of college was one that would stick with me for years. Pokemon. I had never played Pokemon competitively until I met a guy named Liam. He would talk about how his team was the greatest in the game and no one would ever be able to beat it. After a few months I had had enough. I went to my 2 friends who played competitively on Shoddy Battle and asked for their help. A rocky training montage ensued as I EV'd my first team in secret. The 3 of us would train my team in shifts, and a week later I was ready to tell Liam to nut up or shut up. Everyone always remembers their first because the first one is special. Aerodactyl, Arcanine, Swampert, Snorlax, Jolteon and Machamp were my chosen partners to take this tyrant down. I hard-countered everything in his team of pseudo-legendaries, and it was finally over. Or so I thought. After his crushing 3-0 defeat, he wanted a rematch. A new team for a new game. The Pokemon bug had wriggled its way into my brain. What started as a simple scheme to shut someone up had turned into an obsession. I wanted to be the very best, like no one ever was. My second year of college saw me move from console to PC. I brought my Xbox and all of my games into college and proceeded to sell as much as I could. Along with the PC came the phenomena that was League of Legends, and you know I jumped straight on that bandwagon. I played for quite a while during its first year and managed to get to an average level of skill, but the MOBA genre just wasn't for me. The FPSs were calling. My first major purchase on Steam was the Valve collection. This included pretty much all of Valve's games, and I have regretted that decision ever since. The only light in this otherwise dark tunnel was Counter-Strike Source. I never played this game seriously, just dropped in and out when I had a few minutes to play, but it started a fire in me that continued to burn. At the end of college, I decided not to go to university. I got a job and moved out of my parents' house. I went and bought a TV, another Xbox 360, and Guitar Hero 3. I was seriously late to the rhythm game party, but I was immediately hooked to the colours, lights and sounds. It took a long time for me to move from easy to medium, but after I moved to hard mode, it didn't take long to get to expert. Almost every day I would have people over and play against them. Knights of Sidonia was my warm-up. I couldn't be beaten. Except by one of my friends who could play Jessica with his eyes shut, but never mind that. The other game I had during this time was Gears of War 3. Of the original trilogy, Gears 3 was the game I spent the least amount of time with, mostly due to the person I played most with unfortunately dying. His gamer tag lives on through me though. He was the original Lenning, and through me he will continue to frag noobs. Rest in peace, Lenning. 2012, the year the world was going to end. CSGO was released and I picked it up around 6 months later. I started to take it more seriously, actually delving into competitive mode and gathering a group of friends to play with. I did take long breaks during this period, as work was getting in the way of my hobbies and so my skill level suffered, and with it my enjoyment of the game. A childhood staple came back into view this year. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a card game that I played religiously in primary school, and in 2012 I found the Dueling Network. It was an online platform where you could make a deck and play against real people. The only thing wrong with it was that the rules were all on a gentleman's agreement. You could do whatever you wanted at any time, so you just had to hope that your opponent was honest and allowed you time to consider every move they made. This was all well and good until you had someone who knew their combo like the back of their hand and expected you to know it as well. It got a little tiresome when you would argue over what the card said should happen and what the player interpreted should happen for the 15th time, so I ended up just leaving the site. So, 2014, my on-again, off-again relationship with League of Legends was dwindling even more, but a better MOBA was on the horizon. Smite was very similar to League, however rather than a top-down view it was third-person, and the auto-attacks had to be done manually. The other selling point of Smite was that you play as gods from various religions, which had much more appeal to me, but still didn't keep me playing for more than a few months. I was still playing CSGO in the meantime, slowly building my skill and developing more synergy with the teammates I played with. The major focus from this year was Pokemon again. I bought Pokemon Y but didn't like it much. However, when the Gen 3 remakes came out, it scratched the competitive Pokemon itch I had had since college. I spent around 500 hours breeding, EV training and battling with as many teams as I could make. Some of which you can see on this very channel. The videos are extremely cringy, I highly recommend them. When I finally finished up with Pokemon, I had around 3 boxes of EV trained Mons that were all legitimately obtained, an enviable feat if ever there was one. I continued to play Pokemon competitively until the release of Gen 7, as the Festival Plaza ruined the experience for me. Until Game Freak brings back the player search system, Pokemon Showdown will have to suffice. 2015 and League of Legends is almost dead to me. I had a very short stint on Dota 2 to try and get good at the MOBA genre, but at this point I've realised it's really not for me. I got a little better at CSGO, but still hadn't gotten to the point where I felt I hit my skill cap. The big game of 2015 for me was Hearthstone. I was introduced to it by a friend at 10 PM on a Friday night, and I played it until 5 AM the following morning. It was exactly what I was looking for after Yu-Gi-Oh! Online became too toxic, and Yu-Gi-Oh! In real life became way too expensive. It took a long time to build up a good collection of cards, but after around 10 months I was winning more games than I was losing, so I was pretty satisfied. The following year, however, there was a major change to Hearthstone, making it easier for new players to pick up while simultaneously dicking on the old players that had spent days and weeks building their card collections. I dipped into it on and off, but after the last major change in gameplay, I never touched it again. Evolve Stage 2 pinged on my radar in 2016, and I was pretty keen to play it. After the massive flop that was Evolve, Stage 2 set out to rectify the mistakes of the past. However, for most gamers, the damage had been done, and the player base was lacking. Evolve Stage 2 was a lot of fun and I kicked ass as the Elder Kraken, but once the Elder Kraken became available by grind or microtransaction, I was quickly done with Evolve. 2016 was the year that I started to take CSGO seriously, playing around 5 to 8 games a day with a team of 4 or 5 friends and spending more money than I'm willing to admit on skins. I also got into the CSGO gambling sites, not the roulette ones but the ones where you bet on pro games, and had a lot of fun with it. I think 2016 was definitely the time where I was the best I had ever been at CSGO, and I would love to get back to that level. I continued to play Pokemon late into 2016, even entering a few small contests and placing top 10 in 2 of them. Granted they were both out of 16 players, but still. As mentioned earlier, it was the release of Gen 7 that killed my interest in the handheld version of Pokemon, but I still play Showdown to this day, even if the community is less than friendly. And here we are in 2017. This year has flown by, and I haven't really changed much in my competitive gameplay habits. I didn't play much Counter-Strike until June, but now I try to play at least 1 game a day. Gwent came along to replace the gap left by Hearthstone, but it has failed to grip me in the same way Hearthstone did. I'm not sure why, but hopefully I can get into it at some point so that my card game need is fulfilled. The major recurrence this year has been Halo 2. When I made my Halo 2 in retrospect, I found out about the online community still going today, and thanks to that I can replay the game that filled so much of my childhood again. The skill level is still demanding, but it's a great game to just drop in for an hour and play without the pressure of ranking to deal with. Who would have thought that a game almost 14 years old would still have me hooked to this day? And there we have it, folks, the comprehensive history of my life in competitive gaming. I'd love to hear what the most influential games of your past were, so don't forget to leave a comment below. If you like this video and feel it deserves it, leave a thumbs up or even share it with your friends. I hope you all enjoyed this trip down memory lane as much as I did. I'll see you next time, and have a wonderful day wherever you are.
What? I hit that? Could you please clip that for me, bro?